A 12-year-old boy climbs out of a window. He runs, barefoot, across a stranger's lawn in Ivins, Utah, in the last week of August 2023. He knocks on a door he has never seen before. When someone finally answers, he is calm. Too calm. He asks for two things: water and a ride to the nearest police station. The neighbor notices the duct tape first, wrapped around his ankles, then the wrists, then the wounds underneath it. The boy weighs almost nothing. His mother had 2.5 million people watching her post videos of his childhood, 5 mornings a week, for 8 years. None of them were in the room. Child Protective Services had already investigated this family once before. They found nothing. What they missed, and why an agency built to catch exactly this kind of harm walked away with nothing, is one of the most important questions this case ever raised. We'll get to that. Rewind to 2015. A YouTube channel called 8 Passengers, a Mormon family of 8 in Springville, Utah. A mother, Ruby Franke, uploading 5 mornings a week at 6 a.m., a husband, Kevin, appearing occasionally at the edges of frame. 6 children growing up on camera. The channel didn't sell chaos, it sold order, rules as love, discipline as devotion, family as brand. By June of 2020, it had built an audience most cable networks would envy: 2.5 million subscribers, 1 billion views. Ruby Franke wasn't a niche creator anymore. She was one of the most watched parents on the internet, dispensing parenting philosophy to millions of strangers who trusted the footage because the footage looked so ordinary. The viewers who watched most carefully weren't the ones who missed the warning signs. They were the ones who saw them first. And when they reported what they saw, the system that was supposed to listen didn't act. We'll come back to that too. The first warning signs weren't hidden. They were uploaded on purpose as content. In 2020, viewers learned that Ruby's teenage son had been banned from his bedroom and made to sleep on a beanbag in the basement for 7 months. The comment section didn't stay quiet. A petition circulated. People filed reports with Utah's Division of Child and Family Services. Investigators opened a case. They closed it. Insufficient evidence to act. Ruby kept posting. Then came smaller cruelties, filmed and narrated as lessons, refusing to bring a 6-year-old her forgotten lunch, explaining on camera that the child needed to feel the natural consequence, threatening to give away her children's belongings, taking Christmas away from her 2 youngest in 2021. Each incident drew complaints. Each investigation went nowhere. The channel kept growing while, behind the camera, something else was accelerating. Here's why the system missed it. 8 years of footage had built Ruby Franke a kind of alibi before anyone ever needed one. A documentary record of a mother who looked present, engaged, and involved. When investigators showed up, that record worked in her favor. The camera wasn't hiding the abuse. It was providing cover for it. The person most responsible for what happened to Ruby Franke's children wasn't only Ruby Franke. At least, that's what the defense argued, and the record partly supports it. Jodi Hildebrandt was a licensed therapist. In 2007, she founded ConneXions, a self-improvement and relationship coaching program. Former clients would later describe a pattern: isolation from family, dependency on Hildebrandt's approval, marriages that didn't survive her involvement. She met Ruby through their church community in Utah. Within a few years, she had become inseparable from the family, a life coach, a business partner, and eventually the person whose judgment Ruby trusted over almost anyone else's, including her own husband's. At Hildebrandt's encouragement, Ruby separated from Kevin. Later, Ruby moved her 4 youngest children into Hildebrandt's home in Ivins. What happened inside that house does not need to be described in detail here, and cold verdict won't do that. What's confirmed by court records is enough: malnourishment, physical restraint, and a 60-page handwritten journal in which Ruby wrote that her children were possessed, and that what she and Hildebrandt were doing to them was a form of repentance. Where a therapist's influence ends and a parent's own responsibility begins was a question the court weighed at sentencing. It didn't resolve it cleanly. Ruby pleaded guilty. So did Hildebrandt. Both accepted the same charges. And the pattern didn't end at sentencing. According to the director of the Netflix documentary on the case, Hildebrandt has continued forming small counseling circles inside prison, seeking out vulnerable inmates, offering guidance, doing, in the director's words, largely what she was doing before she was ever arrested. Back to the door. The boy had tried to escape once before in July. He didn't make it. This time, he did, climbing out a window, running until he found a house that wasn't Jodi Hildebrandt's. The neighbor saw the duct tape, the wounds underneath it, the thinness of a child who hadn't been eating enough for months. He called 911. Officers searched Hildebrandt's home under emergency authority without a warrant based on what the boy told them that his younger sister might still be inside. They found her in a closet, 9 years old, silent. It took them time to get her to speak. 4 of Ruby and Kevin's children were placed into state care. Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were arrested and charged, each with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse, held without bail. The injuries were considered too severe to risk release. The 8 passengers' channel went dark within days. December 2023. Both women pleaded guilty, 4 counts each of aggravated child abuse, down from 6. At sentencing in February 2024, Ruby Franke addressed the court. Asked to formally enter her plea, she grew visibly emotional and said, "With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty." 4 consecutive terms, 1 to 15 years each. Under Utah law, the maximum any sentence can run consecutively is 30 years. The Board of Pardons and Parole will hold its first review of both sentences in December 2026, roughly 3 years after the guilty pleas, standard timing under Utah's parole process. Before that hearing, both women have been ordered to complete cognitive behavioral therapy and a full mental health evaluation. They're held at the same facility, different sections, deliberately kept apart. Kevin Franke filed for divorce weeks after the arrest. It was finalized in March 2025, after roughly 25 years of marriage. He was granted full custody of the 4 youngest children. In late 2025, he remarried. He has said since that he regrets ever putting his children's lives online for an audience, that children cannot meaningfully consent to being filmed for public consumption. He's since supported Utah legislation extending new protections to children of social media influencers. Ruby has continued writing to him from prison. At a certain point, he asked the Department of Corrections to stop passing the letters along. Their eldest daughter, Shari Franke, published a memoir in January 2025, The House of My Mother, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom. She has spoken publicly and repeatedly about where she's landed on the question everyone eventually asks her: does she forgive her mother? Her answer from that same interview: part of her feels guilty for not forgiving, but she's come to understand forgiveness differently now, not as reconciliation, but as refusing to let her mother's actions keep occupying space in her mind. She's still angry. She says that anger isn't going anywhere, but she's not going to hand over any more of her life than has already been taken. She has no plans to rebuild a relationship with Ruby. In spring of 2025, Utah passed new legislation expanding the legal definition of child abuse and increasing penalties for future cases involving children exploited for online content. It doesn't touch Ruby's existing sentence. It changes what happens to the next family like hers. But the harder question the case raised isn't answered by a new law. It's this: how does a family with 2.5 million people documenting their lives get missed, not once, but repeatedly, by the exact system built to catch this? The footage wasn't a smokescreen. It was worse than that. It was evidence submitted in the family's own favor that everything was fine. Ruby Franke's youngest son is a teenager now. His identity is protected. His recovery is his own. What he carries from that August morning, the decision to climb out a window, to run, to knock on a stranger's door and ask, calmly, for help, belongs to him. Not to this video, not to any documentary, not to the channel that filmed his childhood for 8 years without ever once turning the camera toward what was actually happening. What the rest of us carry is different. It's the question of what 2.5 million people watched and didn't see until a 12-year-old did the one thing the system never managed to do for him. He saved himself. If this case made you think, say so in the comments. The next full breakdown is already up.